There we are. Continue if you can.
Well, welcome. It's a great pleasure of mine to introduce Altin Hysi to all of you. I first met him in 2007, which was when I was sent to Albania. So just to explain, I work for the British and Foreign Bible Society, and I'm a technical consultant basically. So I know all the software and technical tricks to help Bible translators without being a translator myself. So I help out various teams and troubleshoot and sort them out. Or I also interested in history, so I also digitize old texts. So we did a bit of research on the Albanian Bible in our archives, and I was asked if I could help them out. So since 2007, on and off, I've been working with Altin, leaving them to do the translation because I don't speak enough Albanian, but giving technical help here and there. And what I've done today, he sent me a load of photographs and I've put together a little PowerPoint. So I'm going to hand over to Altin, and then we will go through a bit of a PowerPoint as well. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Altin from Tirana, live from Tirana.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great privilege to be in front of you tonight, and as a Anglo-Albanian association, thank you for the invitation. And the topic that we have is known to me, at least for the last 25 years, as I've been the executive director or the general secretary of the Interconfessional Bible Society of Albania. Interconfessional is a bit of a strange name, not to have to be in a way misunderstood with ecumenism, with ecumenical. Interconfessional because the Orthodox Church of Albania, the Catholic Church in Albania, and the Protestant churches have come together, the three confessions have come together to found the Albanian Bible Society. And they are together in this with their representatives as board of directors. And I am executive director. I am a Protestant myself by confession. For interest, probably not necessarily to the topic, I became a Christian believer when I was a refugee in Austria in 1991. And I got a New Testament in Albanian at that time, given to me by some missionaries. This New Testament was translated by a gentleman, a very distinguished, I think, nobleman, Englishman, who translated the whole Bible into Albanian, and he did translate this in standard Albanian. It was the first translation in standard Albanian of the full Bible. And after that, his name is Stephen Etchis, by the way. He was a missionary in Austria, and he lives now in England. And Stephen Etchis translated the Bible into Albanian, and it was this New Testament that I got for the first time in my life in Albania, because I was born and grew up in communist Albanian, where at that time the religious books were prohibited to have, to read, to circulate. So I come from a Muslim background, nominal Muslim background, but I converted to Christianity when I was a Christian. This is a bit of a personal story. But the topic that we have today, I will go immediately in. I have put an outline together, and I have, let's say, three main points that I would like to talk about. And the first one is to give a little bit of context about the translation of the Bible from 1815 to 1900. This is to do especially with the activity of the organization Neil is still working for, the British and Foreign Bible Society. This is an organization which was found in 1804, and they started their activity immediately in many countries and even continents, with the aim to translate the Bible and to distribute the Holy Scriptures among the people, the normal people. So, firstly, I would like to say that the translation of the Bible in Albanian has involved distinguished people regarding the history and the culture of Albania. And by distinguished people, I do not mean only religious people, but I mean people who also have been very well known for their studies, for their research, for their work in philological studies, in linguistic studies, who have been interested, and they have dealt from the beginning when Albanian language somehow came to the interest of these people in the 1800s. So the translation of the Bible in Albanian has not been only important for the Christian churches, namely the Orthodox, the Catholics, and the Protestants, but also for the development of the Albanian language and the Albanian culture. And this is the first point I would like to make. So the Bible, in a way, interestingly enough, has been in Albania at the center, not necessarily only of the Christian churches, which is very normal because it's the book that we use for liturgy, for preaching, and for many other things in the churches, but it was also important for, and just to illustrate this is only to mention that the person of Konstantin Christoforidi, I don't know how many of you have heard of him, but Konstantin Christoforidi is considered to be and accepted by all scholars as the father of the modern Albanian language. Christoforidi translated himself the New Testament starting from 1860 into two dialects, in Geg and Tosk. He himself was from Elbasani, where the Shkumbini River lies, and the Shkumbini River divides the two dialects, let's say. The north part is the Geg dialect, and the south part is the Tosk dialect. And Christoforidi was a genius in this regards, that he possessed skills to translate the New Testament, which is a difficult task in itself, let aside to translate it into two different dialects, like the north, the Geg, and for the south, the Tosk. And he did translate the two New Testaments, which were published respectively, the Geg in 1869 and the Tosk dialect New Testament in 1879. Another distinguished Albanian named Gjergj Qiriazi, who was one of the workers of, at that time, British and Foreign Bible Society, he was involved in Bible translation work. Now, Gjergj Qiriazi was a member of the commission of the Congress of Monasteri held in 1908. This is probably one of the most important events for the Albanian language and the Albanian culture, because in Monasteri, in today Bitola, Northern Macedonia, Albanians from the different religions and from different backgrounds, scholars and leaders, came together to decide on the Albanian alphabet, which until that time was not decided. So it was in 1908, and it was a distinguished person who was a Bible translator and the worker of the British and Foreign Bible Society, Gjergj Qiriazi, who was called to be member of the commission. And there are many, many others.
I'm getting from there, shall I?
Well, we've got all our stuff here, so we're gonna come back anyway.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
and there are many others who could be mentioned here, but I will not do so because of time. My second point would be that the Bible texts which were translated and published at that time became a basis for philological studies for the Albanian language and culture. To illustrate, in 1835, the German philosopher Joseph Ritter von Xilander published his work called entitled Die Sprache der Albanesen oder der Skyptaren, which is one of the first to argue for the Albanian language as an Indo-European language. Until that time, many theories were circulated about the language of the Albanians. For his research and studies, and this is important to notice for our topic, Xilander would use the translation of the Gospels that was published at the time. This is what he declared at the time regarding the publishing of the Gospel of Mark. I quote, "With this translation, the time of doubt and uncertainty about the Albanian language is over. Through it, the other people of the world have a sure basis to accept it as a full language." After Xilander, there is a long list of distinguished scholars who made use of the publication of the New Testament in Albanian in their scientific work. To mention a few, Johann von Hahn, Franz Bopp, Demetrius Camarda, Gustav Meyer, and others. And it is proven, and it's a fact, that they would use the translation of the Bible for their research. A very interesting figure in this, and probably with some interest to the British people, is the figure of the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, Louis Lucien Bonaparte, who was the son of the second surviving brother of Napoleon Bonaparte. He lived in England for a good time of his life, and he was interested in the Albanian language. He did studies for the dialects of the English language and of the Basque language. But for some reason, he was interested about the Albanian language, and he had a very rich library. And in his library are at least 3 and more actually scriptures, but 3 gospels in 3 different variants of the Albanian dialects. And he would use the gospels as a basis for his research and for his studies. And these gospels were translated during this period that we are talking about, 1815, 1825, 1830, and so on. My third point is that this edition of the gospel, and this is, I think, a very important point now for the time that we are talking about, this edition of the Gospels and the New Testaments, which were printed, were the first printed books ever to circulate in Albania, targeting the ordinary reader. And this is very important to notice. Now, the Gospels, not only, and the New Testaments, the scriptures, not only were being translated into Albanian, but they were being distributed and not just for some priests and for some scholars, but for the wider population. And this is, of course, thanks to the vision and mission of the British and Foreign Bible Society, but also to the Albanians who were working with them and for them. They were not just texts for the scholars, as I said, but for every person. In her book, 20 Years of Balkan Tangle, in the 7th chapter, Edith Durham would write, quote, "As for the Gospels in Albanian language, it was an interesting thing to see that the Muslims were buying them the same as the Christians did." A very interesting quote and observation, effect from this time. The distribution of these editions became very successful through the hard work of the so-called colporteurs, who would travel all over Albania, Greece, and other neighboring territories populated by the Albanians. And I come now to the exceptional role, regarding the historical context, the exceptional role of the British and Foreign Bible Society for the translation of the Bible in Albanian. It is not an overstatement at all that the great merit and credit for the pioneering work for the translation of the Bible in Albanian goes to the British and Foreign Bible Society, which was founded in London in 1804. Its aim was to help and support the translation of the Bible in the vernacular of many nations all over the world. The very fact, and this is, I think, a good point, a very interesting fact for us, the very fact that not later than 12 years after its founding, British and Foreign Bible Society would identify the need for translation of the Bible in Albanian officially, and to start its effort towards this goal deserves at least great admiration. This is what Robert Pinkerton, the representative of Moscow branch of the Bible Society, wrote in his letter of August 28, 1816 from Vienna. Quote, "The furnishing of the Albanians with the New Testament, at least in their own language, is an objective highly worthy of attention of the British and Foreign Bible Society. This nation occupies a great part of ancient Illyricum and Epirus, and speaks a language which seems to have no grammatical affinity with the Slavonian, Turkish, Greek, or Latin languages. Most of the Albanians are professed Christians belonging to the Greek communion. Others are so deeply sunk in ignorance of the principles of Christianity that they have embraced the Mohammedan faith. Their service is performed in Greek language, which is quite unintelligible to the people, and even to the most of their priests. They have still no part of the word of God in their own tongue. Their number is not accurately ascertained, but they are reckoned at between 800 and 900 souls. After much inquiry, I find that the translation of the New Testament into the Albanian might be executed by some person or persons in the Ionian Islands. I have no doubt from the conversations I have had with some intelligent Albanians here that persons competent to the task are to be found there. The work ought to be executed under the superintendence of one of the most learned and respectable of the Albanian bishops, and the expense both of the translations and printing must be defrayed by the British and Foreign Bible Society." An interesting fact to highlight again the role of the British and Foreign Bible Society into the translation of the Bible in Albanian is an episode with Ismail Cemali, the first Albanian president, when he was visiting London on May 1913. He was in London together with Mehmet Kornica and Philip Noga as a delegation of the Ambassadors' Conference in England. And on May 17, he asked if he could pay a visit to the BFBS, British Foreign Bible Society, that is, in order, quote, to thank them for the help they have rendered in the Albanian question by producing the Bible and other things. The visit was made possible on May 20th, and the newsman at that time, Charles Woods, who was the mediator, 2 days later wrote that the visit confirmed the sympathetic attitude of Ismail Cemali towards the work of the Protestants in Albania, and that he was very grateful for the interest they had shown, offering them any kind of help in the future. And now I would like to mention some of the editions that were translated, because this is of interest, because this is the product that came out at that time, the books, the New Testaments, the Gospels, the selections that were translated at that time, although with many difficulties, under pressure from the Ottoman Empire and the others who were not interested. There was a great activity going on, very intense activity. Here are some of the most important editions translated and published by the British and Foreign Bible Society at that time. The first to translate the New Testament into Tosk Albanian was Vangel Meksi, who was an officer and physician of Alipash Tepelena, who had already prepared an Albanian grammar. On September 1824, almost 200 years ago, the printing of the Gospel of Matthew was finished, the first full part of the Albanian Bible that we know of today. And then the whole New Testament was published in 1820 with the editing work of Gregor Gerokrastridi, which might be the bishop that Pinkerton mentions in his letter. He was the Archbishop of Eubea in Greece. Then the translations of Constantine Christoforidi followed, initially in the Geg dialect. The discussion was that British Foreign Bible Society did not want to go into a project and make expenses and pay money for another Tosk New Testament, since Vangel Mexi had already done the translation work of the Tosk. So Christoforidi was charged with the task to translate the New Testament into Geg. Therefore, the first work of Christoforidi was his translation of the Geg of the New Testament, which was published in 1869. For the first time, a New Testament is published in Northern dialect, a full New Testament. After 1872, publications were done only in Tosk dialect. The Psalms were published in 1868, the whole New Testament in 1879, Genesis and Exodus, which are books of the, together with the Psalms, of course, and Deuteronomy and Proverbs and Isaiah, books of the Old Testament. So not only the New Testament, but books of the Old Testament. Christoforidi left in handwriting 5 other books of the Old Testament. With the publication of these translations, as Alexander Thomson, the representative of British and Foreign Bible Societies, said in 1867, quote, "These interesting people soon will no more be accused of not having a written language." And I would like to repeat this because I think this pays tribute to the work of these people, but also shows an important fact regarding the situation and regarding where the Albanian written language stood at that time. So these interesting people soon will no more be accused of not having a written language. And here I come just to mention some words regarding the person of Alexander Thomson. Alexander Thomson labored for 36 years as the principal agent for the Bible Society in the Ottoman Empire. He died on January 15th, 1899, and was buried in Istanbul. His grave is located at the Ferikoi Protestant Cemetery with the epitaph in loving memory of Alexander Thomson, DD of Arbroath, Scotland, 52 years a resident of the city as missionary to the Jews from the Free Church of Scotland, as agent of the British and Foreign Bible Society, and in retirement doing literary work for the benefit of the Jews and Albanians. Born December 2nd, 1820, died January 15th, 1899. Through the years, Thomson worked tirelessly alongside Constantine Christoforidi, Gerasim Chiriazi, Gerd Chiriazi, and the Albanian colporteurs with the conviction that disseminating the word of God would bring much needed change to the lives of people among whom they labored. The obituary prepared for him by the Bible Society reads, "His own special attention was given to the dialects of Albania, and he devoted his heart and purse freely to educational and Bible work in that province." I would like to close the remarks on the historical context, and I'm sorry that probably took a bit long. History, as much as it is fascinating, sometimes becomes boring, but I would like to close these remarks by highlighting one important fact, which is the passion these people had for the translation and the distribution of the Holy Scriptures in Albania. so much so that for the Christoforidi grammar, which was not a religious text at all, and it has been one of the most important books for the Albanian language, for the establishment of the modern Albanian by Christoforidi, which was published in 1882, the money was collected and paid personally by Alexander Thompson. So these people saw that the translation of the Bible for the Albanians would need to go hand in hand with efforts for the Albanian language to be elevated and for many other works to be supported. That's why I emphasize the fact that the translation of the Bible in Albanian has not been just a topic and an interest for the churches. And now I come to the second part of my talk, which actually is the part that Neil was introducing me to the Anglo-Albanian Association because it has to do with the publication of the full Bible in Albanian, translated from the original, a work that took almost 20 years. And it has been, I think, a milestone. And I would like to illustrate why I think and why we think it has been a milestone for the modern times that we live in. We baptized, and when I say we, I mean the Bible Society Board of Directors and the translators. We baptized the project with the name Sabashku, which translated into English means together. This was because there was a team of 3 translators who each respectively represented the Orthodox Church in Albania, the Catholic Church, and the Protestant churches. So even the project itself, not only the Bible Society as an organization, even the project itself involved 3 translators, each representing respectively his own church. So Orthodox, 1 Catholic, 1 Protestant. That's why the project is called interconfessional translation, the translation of Sabashku. And they worked constantly together with expertise, with commitment and diligence to carry out this task. It is a bit ironic that we started the preparation for this work in 1997, when Albania, as you might recall, some of you, was going through a tragic year of big unrest in the country. And it was at that time when we were planning to build something, to start to build something in the midst of those days of destruction. The first point I would like to emphasize, which is important and I think would illustrate why it is a milestone, is that the churches came together and became the shareholders of the translation project. So this project was not just done by some people and by one church or by one entity. It was all the churches coming together. And I think this is an example also for the Albanian society, that not the Bible Society, but I mean the Albanian society, because it shows that with goodwill, Albanians can come together, although with many differences, even with doubts about each other, which are okay, which are natural in these circumstances, but still for a greater purpose, they can come together and they can work together. So the first task of the Bible Society was to get the official agreement, or as it's known in the churches, the blessing of all the churches for them to participate in this project. Whoever knows or has an idea about church politics knows how difficult this task might be. However, to our great joy and wonderful surprise, the hierarchs of the churches, namely the Orthodox Archbishop Anastasios, the late Catholic Archbishop Archbishop Rok Mirdita, and the Protestant pastors not only agreed, but they gave their blessing to encourage us, to help us, and to support us in this endeavor. So it became an Albanian project and not necessarily projects supported with foreign money, with Albanian translators, with Albanian workers together. I will mention, to illustrate the willingness of the churches in this, I'll just mention just one example. Very often, the translation team at that time, and I'm talking about the year 2000, 2001, the translation team at the time would work from the offices in Tirana of the Catholic Archbishop Rok Mirdita. The reason for this, and this is where you see this picture was in the yard there, the beautiful flowers. The reason for this was because Archbishop Mirdita had a power generator, and so the team could work having electricity non-stop when there were consistent power cuts throughout the city. Although I should say that this was not, the generator was not powerful enough to have us have the possibility to get heating in the winter and air conditioning in the summer. But it was enough for the computers to work. And for all of you who have been in Albania at the time, might recall what a difficult time was regarding the power supply. But I want to emphasize this fact that we were welcomed at the office of the Archbishop Mirdita, who did not at all necessarily had to host us there. It is worth mentioning that in his historical visit to Albania, Pope Francis congratulated which I had the privilege to meet in person, to congratulate me, but through me, the Interconfessional Bible Society of Albania, for the work with the churches in the translation of the Bible and for becoming a platform where churches sit together for the translation, publishing, and distribution of the Holy Scripture. The second point regarding the translation Sabashku together, I would like to mention is the training of the translators in Hebrew and Greek. The United Bible Societies, which our Bible Society is part of, emphasizes always the translation of the Bible from the original languages. And so we took this task to translate the Bible from the original, but we were faced with a question: where could we find Albanian translators who knew Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek? I mean, ancient Hebrew, ancient Greek. During the years of communist regime, most of the Albanian scholars who possessed those skills were persecuted, put in prison, or even killed. So we were faced with a lack of scholars. The solution we found was this: 3 young, bright Albanians who had studied theology and foreign languages, who firstly underwent a year of training in the biblical languages. So we provided a platform of training in the biblical languages for our translators, because we wanted to be serious with translating from the original. We faced much skepticism because of the age of the translators. They were in their mid-20s, but it actually proved to be a strong point for our work, not only because they were very capable, but also because they had less prejudice in regard to each other, differences of church traditions. And this is a picture of the translation team working together. The third difficulty to face was the one regarding the methodology. The team among each other was this: each translator was to translate a certain book of the Bible, circulate the translation of the text they translated to the other two members, circulated by email for comments. Then they would meet in person together, the three of them, and go through the text and discuss and agree as a team, sentence by sentence, phrase by phrase, word by word, and make a final decision. Therefore, after this was done, the text belonged to the team and no longer to the translator who had translated it initially. That made it a difficult task, more work, but fruitful for the teamwork. And now I would like to mention some practical difficulties regarding the terminology. And for the audience now, those who know some Albanian, this might be of interest because I will mention some Albanian words as it has been very key for these terms for the difficulties that we faced as the team. For example, there are two variants for the name of God. So we, as Christians, God is triune, is Trinity: God the Father, God the Son, Jesus, and God the Holy Spirit. So for all these three names in Albanian, we have two different variants for God the Father, three different variants for Jesus, and two for the Holy Spirit. It's respectively Perendi or Hy for God, is Isu, Jesus or Jesu for Jesus, and it is Spiriti Saint or Fruma Saint for the Holy Spirit. Another difficulty which I recall, and there were many, but just for your interest to give some examples, was the translation of the Greek word psyche, which the English translates, many English translations of the Bible translate soul. Previous Albanian translators have translated it as spiriti or fruma, but it's the same word as spirit, it's not the word psyche. So our translator decided for a different term, and the term is chenia, which in English would be the being of the person. But imagine these discussions were not merely 5-minute work, but it probably took sometimes one day. The team decided to let everything else and to discuss on these issues. Also, many of the names of the people in the Bible had 2 or 3 variants. The translators had to make a decision. This was because of the churches being more present respectively in the south of the country and the north of the country, and the names had taken the forms of the respective dialects, as well as respective the influence from the Greek for the Orthodox Church and Latin for the Catholic Church. For example, just to mention some names, the name of the prophet Elijah for the Orthodox is pronounced Elia, and for the Orthodox is pronounced Elia, and also spelled, written differently. For the name of Apostle Peter, we have Petro for the Orthodox and Peter for the Catholics. The name of Apostle John, we have Johann for the Orthodox and John for the Catholics. For the name of the first martyr of the church, Stephen, we have Stefan for the Orthodox or Stephen for the Catholics. And this list can go very, very, very long. And we had to decide which option to take. Just to mention, this is just to illustrate some of the difficulties. The last thing I would mention regarding this translation is a very important thing that has accompanied our work throughout. Our translation, in the eyes of the translators and of the Bible Society, had to be faithful to the original, as well as understandable and beautiful for the Albanian reader. The translators of Sabashku have made great efforts on being faithful with the original text, as well as producing a text which would be understandable and beautiful. I'll give one example from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 14. The English translation is the word became, referring to Jesus, the word became flesh. If you translate the word became flesh into Albanian, fjala u bë mish, we do not have two words like you have in English, flesh and meat, that you buy at the shop. We have one word, and that would be a bit funny for the reader, especially for the reader who does not have a biblical understanding. And so we wanted to translate it differently. You could go for a dynamic translation, which would be the word became a human being, would be a right dynamic translation, but we did not want, so to stay faithful to the original, we did not want to lose the root of the word mish. And so the translators thought and found a solution. And so the translation that we have now is fjala u mishrua. So for all of those who know Albanian, this is a good way to translate the word became flesh. And another example would be regarding the texts of the Bible, which are of the poetry genre. The Albanian is very rich when it's about texts that have to do with giving wishes and curses, not necessarily in the lexic, but in the way, in the form that it is formed. Like in English, you have, if you say to someone that you want to live longer, you say, may you live. Albanian has just one word, rofsh, with just one vowel and 4 consonants. Or for another way of expressing something else, a curse, when you want to say to somebody, may you die, which is not a good thing, but you find it in the poetry, is vdeksh, another word, just one word, that is a great way of translating the Bible and to make the language beautiful. And our translators paid a lot of attention to that. These are some of the points regarding the translation. I would like to mention now the names of the translators for your interest. It is Johan Lena, who is Orthodox. He was in the team for the New Testament and the Old Testament. Marian Paloka, who is a Catholic priest. He also was for the New Testament and Old Testament. And we had Zefian Nicola, who was a Protestant for the New Testament, and Oldi Morava, who is a British citizen now and resides in England. He is a Protestant, and he worked on the team for the Old Testament. We printed, and I will conclude this part, we printed the Bible, a full Bible. We printed the New Testament in 2007, we published it, and since then we have printed 50,000 copies and distributed of the New Testament. And then with the Old Testament being finished in 2019, we printed and published the full Bible last year, 2020. We printed 12,500 copies in the first print run, and we are distributing, and there is great interest. We did publish 2 different editions in respect to the 2 different canons of the Bible, namely the one edition with the deuterocanonical books for the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church, and one edition without the deuterocanonical books for the Protestant Church, in order to serve these churches, these constituencies, in the way that they deserve to be served. The last point, that will be very short, only 3 minutes now, that I will not expand much, is the Geg and Tos dialect and the standard Albanian. Although it has become recently, in the last 20 years, one of the most debated topics for many people in Albania, as I said, after the fall of communist regime. The 2 main dialects of the Albanian language are the Geg and the Tosk. Geg is spoken in the northern part of the country, while Tosk is spoken in the southern Albania. The Shkumbini River near Elbasan city divides the 2. Until the beginning of World War II, Bible translations were made in Geg and in Tosk in order to address the need of the recipients of both dialects. The British Informed Bible Society, as I already said, made translations in Geg and in Tosk, and not only selections, but the whole New Testament. In 1972, and this is a year to keep in mind somehow, not a good year probably for many, the Albanian government, the Albanian communist government, called for a Congress of the Albanian language in order for a decision to be made on a standard Albanian. The whole agenda was forced and influenced by the communist agenda. Hence, a big damage was made towards the Geg dialect, especially as they decided to get rid of the infinitive form, which is found in the Geg dialect and not in the Tosk. However, so the standard Albanian is without an infinitive form, which is one of the most treasures, the big treasures of our language. But they decided like this. And if I go into my opinion or to just give some comments of others, this is a very hot potato topic. And since you are recording this, I'm not going to elaborate much in this. Although I have to admit I'm not a scholar, so I'm sure I will make some mistakes. I would like to say, however, that the standard Albanian is what Albanians learn at school since 1972, and is also the official written language. Our work of translating the Sëbashku Bible has been on the standard Albanian. And with this, I conclude, and thank you all for your attention, and I'm very sorry that it took me longer than I had planned.
Well, no, thank you so very much. That was absolutely excellent, and I was certainly fascinated. It had all sorts of information that I was unaware of, and I'm sure we have a lot of questions. So we will devote the next period of the event to questions and answers. I've got one in front of me here, so we can start immediately with this one. This is from Justin Elliott, and he's asking, how do you consider the translation of the Bible into Standard Albanian by Dom Simon Filippi, published in Ferizaj in 1994?
It's an amazing piece of work. Amazing piece of work. Dom Simon Filippi was an Albanian from Montenegro, a priest. He spent 28 years on the translation of the Bible. 28 years. His day started with the books on the table, and it ended like this, and it continued the next day. It is a standard Albanian. There are some, the lexic is a bit sometimes difficult for some Albanians because although it's standard Albanian, it's probably not always the words that every Albanian would use, but it is an excellent piece of work. I mean, we borrowed from him many terms. For example, I remember very well that we were struggling how to translate the word Holocaust, which in English translates burnt offering, and we stole the term from Dom Simon Filippi, which is another term, a flea sacrifice, something like this. Flea shkrumbini, which is a term that he found by himself. Is not used even by Albanian writers. I do not recall to have been used by Albanian writers. So for me, and what I hear from scholars, is a wonderful piece of work. There is some conspiracy, I might mention this, but it's only rumors that I have heard, that the hand manuscript that or the typewriting material, because he was working on the typewriter, that he gave to the publisher probably got some corrections and editing from some other people, but we have never seen the handwriting manuscript.
Thank you. further questions out there?
I have a question, if I may.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
May I ask, when was the Bible, the New Testament reprinted in what one would think of as Albanian script? Christopheridis' Testament, which I have in front of me, is of course written in a mixture of scripts. He uses Greek letters here and there, and frankly, it's quite difficult to read. I wonder when it was actually reprinted in a script we would understand. One small comment I have, you mentioned that it came out in, it was published in Geg in 1879.
69.
I thought it was in Tosk in 69.
No, Geg was before Tosk.
The one I have here is 1872.
Yeah, might be.
But if it was published in 69, that makes sense. Yes. Yeah. Good. Well, so my question stands. When was it rewritten so it can actually be read without thinking? Because at the moment, my Albanian maybe is not good enough, but I find it jolly difficult to read and work out the rather curious letters he's had to use.
I think it was published, if I'm not mistaken, in 1930. It was a work edited by Atanas Sina.
Ah, yes.
And that is the text that the Orthodox Church of Albania, they accepted. At one point, they did not accept necessarily in the beginning, I think, I'm not so sure, but all the translations of Christopheridis, but then it was officially became the official text of the Orthodox Church that they even used for the liturgical text. So I think it was at the time that we reprinted this text. I still have it in my office. It is readable. Even today, it is with Latin letters in the Albanian alphabet.
I have that. Fanoli gave it to my father. So that I have. And I also, I also have this one of Christopheridis, who was a relation of mine.
Amazing. You are muted.
Alexander, you might want to unmute yourself. Oh, there you are.
Did I mute myself by mistake?
Yeah.
When did I cease talking?
Christopheridis was a relation to your...
Yes, he was. I think I probably said everything I need to say. That's probably why I've got this 1872 edition here, relation on my mother's side.
Amazing.
I've got that, and I didn't realize that the one that that Fanoli had was the standard used one, and it dated from 1930.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was very good, a very good address, extremely informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got a small comment from Noel.
Or not.
Yes, thank you. Am I audible?
You are,
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. A fascinating talk. And I mean, just huge congratulations on managing this tremendous long-term project and bringing it to such a successful conclusion. Just a small thought I had when you summarized the early history of the translation of the Bible into Albanian. There is what one might call a prehistory. I'm thinking of Peter Bogdani, who did not produce a translation, but in the text of his great book written in Albanian, the Cuneus Prophetarum, Cete Propheteve. There are many, many passages that are his translations of the Bible, which, of course, he was translating from the Vulgate edition, the standard Catholic Latin translation, going back to St. Jerome. And I've never read any study of the history of Bible translation that includes this as a sort of early element in that tradition. But since I was thinking of it, I took down my copy from the shelf. I'm sure Alexander has the original first edition, but I only have the modern edition. I looked at the passage describing the birth of Jesus, and it says, "Hui che fiala, e fiala u bë mish." And you said that was funny.
For
does
the
it seem
modern,
as it
for
did
the
not
modern
sound
Albanian.
That doesn't sound
too
good.
funny in the 17th century. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Thank you.
Amish.
Can I ask a question, Altin?
Please.
How about on the musical side? Is your translation involved in translating anthems? And in that case, do you need to get advice from musicians in the Academy of Music, or how do you go about that?
What I could say is that the book of Psalms in itself, Psalms is poetry and is text for songs to be sang in the religious buildings. We paid a lot of attention, and the translator Johan, who translated the Psalms, he is a singer he's in the choir of his church, so he's not a professional musician, but he translated the Psalms with music somehow in mind, with the idea how this text could be sang in a way. Not that he did it as a main focus of the translation, but he had this in mind. Your comment regarding music is a very important one, especially for the Orthodox Church, as they have a wonderful choir of the Byzantine, and actually they have even a school of Byzantine music in Tirana, and they are really investing a lot in building this choir, and they have done a tremendous job. We in our work did not have this expertise as the main focus of our work.
Interesting.
I would say just one thing, an interesting project that you might be, it might be worth for you looking at afterwards, is a piece of music composed by an Argentinian called Ramirez, Ariel Ramirez. He translated what is called Misa Criolla. Misa Criolla is the mass of the Catholic Church, and you have hundreds of thousands of these pieces composed, and we put it into a concert with we, when I say we, the Bible Society, with the Academy of Arts choir in Albania, with Susanna Turcu's help, and even a conductor coming from Switzerland who happened to be Argentinian, and I had to translate from English and Spanish, because the original is in Spanish, the words that we were giving to people. So in a way, we ought to pay more attention. It was a wonderful concert, Stephen. Wonderful, actually.
That sounds
very, very well.
I know that piece of music very well because I've lived in Latin America myself, so it's very familiar to me. Right. Well,
Stephen, I've got a question, if I may. It's Gens here.
Hello, Gens. Yes.
Hello. First, I'd like to congratulate Altin on this comprehensive speech on Bible translation. It's an amazing piece of work. I just wanted to ask, how do you rate the other translations, contemporary translations made in the last few decades? One of them that comes to mind is from a good friend of mine who sadly passed away some 10 years ago, Vladimir Dervishi,
yes,
who worked for the translation of the Bible, of the New Testament, from ancient Hebrew and ancient Greek. And he completed the New Testament. How do you rate that translation? And have you kind of relied on the previous translations in your work?
Yes, thank you. One of our main way of doing our work was to make comparison with previous translations, as I mentioned regarding the Catholic one, Dom Simon Philippi. The one that was translated from Vladimir Dervishi, unfortunately, has not been used in the churches as much as it could be and should be probably because of lack of distribution channels, I think. So it has not gotten enough attention. Myself, I have not been able to read much of the Old Testament. That I'm not aware if he did work on the Old Testament, but I've read the New Testament. I think he has been very much concentrated on the original and being faithful to the original. But for us, it was at the time not a text that we were comparing with, because he did not publish the New Testament yet when we were working on the New Testament. The other translations that we got is the Laimi Emir, which the most Protestant churches use. This one was not done was not made from the original, was made from the Italian, from Nuova Diodati, or the New King James, and that lacks a bit of the original, especially for the Old Testament. Although it's one of the first translations and is widely used, especially by the Protestant churches. But unfortunately, the work of Vladimir Dervishi has not, because he passed away, he was living abroad, has not seen much advertisement, and not a great launching has been made of his work. Although there is a nice audio recording of his New Testament done by the actor Timo Floko, the well-known actor, and this has increased the use of the text, mostly the audio text, because people like to listen to Timo Floko, and he does a good job there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got a question from PE4R6A. So I don't know what your name is. I don't know if you could read your message. And after that, we've got Joanna. Would you like to unmute yourself and read out your question?
I think my question, sorry, it's Gregory Morris from North Wales. My question really was whether you expect, Altin, your translation to have an impact on Catholic and Orthodox liturgy. So I think partly it's been answered before, but I mean, one of the problems that has been faced by translators is that people might like their translation, but they're not quite happy with it in the liturgy because they like the old ways.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you for your question, Gregory. Yeah, that's a very difficult task, and I think we will not be able to see much progress. To be honest and to be sincere, much progress that this text will be used in. I mean, for the Protestant churches, this would be very easy. They will take the Bible and the New Translation and they will read it without much consideration of what they have been reading in the past. But for the Orthodox and the Catholic, for the Orthodox, as we mentioned with Stephen's question, sing their hymns, they sing text in the liturgy. So the music plays a big role, and to adapt our text with the music, it'll be more difficult. So that is also a difficult task with them. Also with the Catholics, they are used to their liturgical text. I think it will be we would try and we would like for our text, but it would not be necessarily a battle that we would like to fight very hard, to be honest. It will be for the individual reader to appreciate more our text than for our text to be used in the liturgy. Also because our translators, they have been bold enough to take bold decisions. For example, the Lord's Prayer in Matthew chapter 6, the traditional every Lord's Prayer in the verse where it says, "Forgive our trespasses as we forgive our trespasses." I don't know how it is in English. The word is debt, to owe to someone a debt, and in Albanian is meaning forgive our guilt, or what is another word for English? Someone can help me. Forgive our sins, actually sins, also forgive our sins as we forgive our sinners. And the word is debt. So we took a decision to say to go with the original and write that forgive our debts. Rimet tona, or it could be another word, borj, but we didn't want to use that word. So we used the remit. So what I want to illustrate with this, sorry, it's a bit complicated. What I want to introduce with this is that we took a bold decision to even somehow not go with the tradition of the Lord's Prayer, which is a very important prayer for all the churches and for the liturgy, even for the Protestants who do not have necessarily a liturgy as the Orthodox and Catholics. And we changed it because we wanted to be as truthful to the original as possible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we turn to Joanna? I see here that you have a question, Joanna.
Yes, please. Altin, thank you so much for such a fascinating talk. You talked about the first translations, the first books being circulated in Albania to target the ordinary reader, which, if I can remember the date of it correctly, you know, it must have only been able to target people with the right literacy levels.
Yep.
So I don't know whether there's any research, there's any information, but to what extent did this have an impact on literacy in a way that it may have encouraged people to want to learn to read? But also, was there any result of people changing their religion, of conversion, you know, a bit like you said when you got the Bible in the refugee camp? Did it have a conversion impact? Thank you.
Thank you. To start with the last part of your question, I think the conversion impact had to do with the missionary work, not necessarily with the text, the Bible text itself, although these Bible texts were the tools to be used. But it had to do with, especially with the work of the missionaries, the first Protestant missionaries who came from Great Britain and from United States later on, who were living with the people, who were preaching from these gospels that were translated, and who were actually building and starting schools, some of them, for the Albanian kids to learn how to write and to read. And in this, I probably could relate a bit to your first part of the question, that these people were very open-minded. They were not fanatic missionaries who had come with a gospel to throw into the heads of the Albanians, but they had come, as it happens, and this sometimes unfortunately is the case even in modern times, but they had a very open-minded vision and idea that in order for Albanians to read these gospels, they needed to learn how to write and to read. Therefore, it is the first missionaries and people actually who were working for the British Foreign Bible Society who started the Szkoła e Warszawa in Korç, the school of the girls in Korç, which is an emancipating fact, that you would see girls, Albanian girls, going to school in learning Albanian in the beginning of 1800s. So the idea is it's amazing that this was happening. I'm not sure what was the ratio of the impact of the literacy and the use of these books. Really,
Altin has frozen.
Yeah. Oh dear.
I hear. Am I?
Right. Robert? Here's Robert.
Zim, would you like to ask your question? Sorry, I
Yes, thank you.
as well, it looked like.
Good evening, everyone, and good evening, Altin. Thank you very much. It's a fascinating talk indeed. It's more than a couple of thoughts rather than a question. I can imagine how difficult it is translating the Bible into any language, and I know something about the difficulties encountered by people who translated the Bible in, say, Japanese, Chinese, and Indian, because there were no equivalent of Christian terms. And I was a bit mystified by what you said, that to some extent you encountered some of these challenges, even in Albanian, not to the same extent, but there were some challenges which I understand come because of the, you had your kind of spoiled for choice because of the two dialects and so on and so forth. But I would have thought that perhaps there were earlier translation efforts before the 19th century with Christopher Hysi, given that we do have writings of church nature even before Peter Bogdani, and I would refer very briefly to Theodore Skodrani's 1210 Pan Angelis Formula Pagzimit in 1462, which I'm sure you all know this. As you know, from 1622, when the Sacred Congregation for the Propagation of Faith was set up, and a generation or generations of Albanian priests studied and in Rome or in Italy and so on and so forth, and they raised the issue of the need to translate the Bible because Latin was not, if you like, the language that the Albanian understood. I wonder if you found this early literature, 1210, as I mentioned, with Theodore Skodrani. I don't know if it is available. I understand that it is available. Did you consult this early literature? Because what mystifies me is that you found it difficult to translate the word soul. Is that, did I hear you correctly, or
yes, yes.
So,
Yes.
and you came to an agreement to translate the word soul as what?
Chenia.
Chenia.
For example, in the Magnificat of Mary in the Gospel of Luke,
right,
in chapter 1, I think, or 2, Mary says, "With my whole psyche being, not spirit, not soul, I praise you, Lord," or something like this. Right. And we didn't want to use the word spirit because it's not spirit, it's psyche. And we translated Megiscenian team at the Motheroi or Zot, something like this. Or in many other parts where St. Paul speaks about the three parts of the human person, where he says spirit, soul, and body. So if you say in Albanian spiriti, fruma, the trupi, spiriti and fruma are the same word. Is the word pneuma in Greek. At least as far as I understand. Probably you have a different opinion, but for me, spiriti, not only for me, but for our translators, spiriti and fruma is the same word, only two different ways of saying it.
What about Fanoli? What version did he use?
I'm not sure, to be honest. We did not consult Fanoli's translations. His were mostly liturgical, and we did not consult them. Our Orthodox translator, though, had so probably would have said something else. But this is as much as I remember from the discussions of the team.
I understand. Thank you very much. So just one final point. I understand that you were reluctant to comment on Standard Albanian. I do take your point that it was a controversial decision, but any modern nation needs a Standard Albanian, and there will always be parties which are insulted and not very much happy with the decision. So in a sense, notwithstanding whatever the communists did, I'm glad that Albanian standard does exist now. And I'm speaking someone who is from the north. So I understand the concerns raised by people who live in the north, but I'm glad that the decision was made because a dialect would always be the loser. Thank you very much. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Altin, I've got one question more, and I was telling me that this might be the last question unless somebody comes forward with another very good one. I would just like to know the atmosphere in which you are doing this translating into Albanian of the Bible. Is it an easy atmosphere, or are there, I know you had lots of praise from the Pope, and quite rightly so, and Albania as a whole did, but I'd like to know whether there is any constituency within Albania that really doesn't, is not happy with all this resource going into translating the Bible. And particularly on the eve of a very important election, I'd just like to know how you tell us something about this question of the atmosphere in which you are working.
Well, yeah, the difficulties, we had many people who did not think that this is good to translate the Bible together with other churches. And when they said together with other churches, they meant that their church could translate the Bible and the others should not join. And so we have had always this thing of antagonism, that we are betraying one church for the interest of the other church. And so a lot of fanaticism from Christian point of view. There is fanaticism in the sense that if you sit together with someone who is not of my constituency, then you are betraying the cause, and the word is not being revered and not being translated in a good way. So we had this from the beginning, but this is probably more of an internal thing within Christianity and with the churches. Regarding the spirit, the atmosphere in the Albanian society, we see only wonderful comments. People are very, very, very happy to see Orthodox, Catholics, and Protestants together. I mean, they say this is a wonderful example of you not fighting each other. If there was a testimony that we could give outside of the interest of the translation itself, which is the main thing, is that there is this platform where people come together and they trust each other and they work together. And I think this is a kind of a small treasure that we ought to keep. I think we can offer, let me not be modest now with this, we can offer to some circles of understand in diversity, need accepting of the other person, although you not agree with him, although even he might look like your enemy. So I think we can offer something like this to society, but we do not try to offer it with trumpets. We try to offer it with example.
Very good. Right, thank you, Altin.
Have you time for one more question?
Yes, come on, Rodney.
Well, I did actually write it. I visit Skoda every year, and I've toured the old clock house by Lord Paget, known as the Englishman's Clock. Do you, Altin, are you aware of the history of Lord Paget, whom I read from the guidebook, distributed tracts and Bibles, and even paid Christians to attend church in northern Albania? Can you tell us a bit more about him and how well he spread the Bible?
I think I'm not the person to talk about this, because I heard it from firsthand from Neil Rees, who introduced me with this, and we went to Shkodra together, and it took pictures. But it is known, but somehow it has remained not an unearthed story. So I am überfragt, as the Germans would say here. I do not have the knowledge much of it. If Neil would like to jump in and tell us more, he has made, I think, even a small research about it.
Oh, good. Well, I
Okay.
understand the clock, the tower, of course, was stolen in inverted commas by, went to Girocastra by, yeah, I forget the name now. What was his name? I forget his name now. The dictator.
Enver Hoxha.
Enver Hoxha, beg your pardon. Yes, I had a slight cloud, but that's where it went. But there is a space where the clock is. And I had the privilege of going round it actually before it was closed. We became a cafe, and it was an Englishman's club with a special gallery for the ladies. Apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish they'd open it a bit more.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Roger, thank
if
you.
you want me to talk into this a little bit, this could actually be a whole talk in itself, but I've been to Shkodra and visited the place, and if you let me share screen, I've got some old photos that I can share with you. I don't know if you can see those.
Oh yes, yes.
But that's what it looked like, and that's Lord Paget. Now Lord Paget, he was it's like a subsidiary title of Lord Carnarvon, and the tower at Lord Paget's house is based upon the style of the towers at Carnarvon Castle. And if you put the photos together, it's quite strikingly similar. The clock that you're talking about, the tower had a clock mechanism in it, which is now missing, but the tower is still there. When I visited this place, it was actually a pizza restaurant the first time I visited it, and then upstairs was like a bazaar, a clothing bazaar. And the last time I visited it, which was I think 3 years ago, it was all shut up. And in a poor condition, really. But yes, Lord Paget was an agent for the Religious Tract Society, which distributed religious tracts. It was actually an Anglican organisation, and we're not 100% sure what went on, but it seems like Shkodra was the site of a British consulate. So in the Ottoman Empire days, it was the capital of a region of the empire, and there was a British consulate there, and there was a small British community, and it seems like that they held every Sunday an Anglican service in the house, and they may well have been possibly some Albanians that were interested who came along. So that's the kind of the background to it, really. But as I say, it's in a poor state now, but it's still there. It's still there, and hopefully the building won't be one of those historic buildings that gets bulldozed or knocked down or gets saved in some way, but I don't know how we can help with that.
Well, I was informed that the Anglo-Albanian Association were trying to get some funds together to restore the tower. There was an announcement in the magazine a few editions ago, actually.
Right.
Yes, there were thoughts along those lines.
Yes.
We were worried that we would find it difficult to manage the project remotely, and that we would. Oh, I think also there was a problem that there were conflicting ownership claims to the building. I think that's what put us off most in the end.
Well, Lord Paget owned it, and then it was passed and used by the Royal Gendarmerie under King Zog, and it was actually a station of one of the British officers who was stationed there, and he lived there into the 30s, and then so its ownership has then changed during the communist era, so I don't know what the situation is now. But it was actually occupied in the 30s by an officer called Dorenzi Martin, who was a British gendarmerie officer who himself was descended from Skanderbeg. So it's a very interesting story. I could do a whole talk on it if you want.
Well, thank you.
Right. Well, if there are no more questions forthcoming, I would like to thank people, starting with Altin, who's really delivered a wonderful picture of what his team are doing in terms of the translating and all the various hurdles that they have to negotiate. I had one query, actually, which I wanted to just sort of mention, is that in many countries, particularly countries which are newly transformed in some way, like Albania has been, you often find that the translators are young women rather than young men. And I was surprised to see round the table and in the photographs of little groups of translators that there wasn't a single female. Whereas in some other countries, you wouldn't see a single man, because it's the girls who have really focused on languages and done better in them than the chaps. Anyway, that's just a little comment, but I've enjoyed it very much, Altin, and I hope we will keep in touch with you, and it would be very nice to see you next time I manage to get to Tirana. Neil, as well, we'd love to thank you for acting as a go-between. You are a familiar face to us here in the Anglo-Albanian Association. I don't know how many talks you've given us, but I think it's up to half a dozen by now. And one or two you've given in Parmore House, I recall.
Oh yes, yeah.
So you are a familiar face to us, and thank you so much for being the go-between in contacting Altin. Arba Kochi, many thanks to you, Arba, for helping us deliver this event. I mean, Arba is our king of Zoom, and without him, we do not function. So it's absolutely excellent that we have managed, or Arba has managed rather, to make this rather dramatic switch from one provider to another. We now have another provider, and our website and our Zooming is all under the auspices of Wix, which I'd never heard of before, but maybe for you, some of you, this is a familiar name. Also, I would thank our honorary secretary, Pat Swire, who has helped put this event together. And I did see her. I can't see her on the screen at the moment, but thank you, Pat. And so many old friends I have seen on the screen here, and it's very nice to see you all again. And I hope we will see you again soon, when we'll be talking about the Albanian language in Kosovo. And many thanks. Good evening to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Altin.